There is a particular kind of restaurant that exists at the very top of certain hotels. All crystal chandeliers and hushed conversation, where the clink of silverware against fine china seems to carry just a little further than it should, and where most people walk through the door already certain of exactly how their evening is going to go. It was into a restaurant exactly like that one, on a quiet Thursday evening in early autumn, that Catherine Sinclair walked, holding her 10-year-old daughter's hand. Dressed in a deep navy gown, her hair pinned carefully into a low, elegant knot, she looked every bit the part of a woman who had never once needed to wonder where her next meal might come from. She had no plans that evening beyond a simple dinner with her daughter. She did not expect that before dessert arrived, she would find herself doing something that the maitre d', the wait staff, and several of the other diners would talk about for weeks afterward. Something so quietly unexpected that it would remind everyone who witnessed it of a particular kind of decency the modern world sometimes seems determined to forget. Catherine was 44 years old. She was the founder and chief executive of Sinclair Harbor Group, a private investment firm she had built over nearly 2 decades into one of the most respected boutique firms in the region, specializing in funding small manufacturing and logistics companies that larger investors typically overlooked. She had built her fortune the long way, not through some single dramatic windfall, but through years of careful, patient work, learning the particular discipline of seeing value in places other people had stopped looking. She had been widowed 6 years earlier, when her husband Thomas passed away from a heart attack at the age of 41. She had raised their daughter, Sophie, largely on her own ever since, carrying the particular dual weight of running a demanding company while trying to give her daughter as ordinary and grounded a childhood as her circumstances would allow. Tonight was meant to be simple. A quiet dinner to celebrate Sophie's recent achievement in a regional math competition, the kind of small, ordinary milestone that Catherine had learned over the years to treat with as much genuine celebration as any major business success, because she understood, in the particular way grief sometimes teaches a person to understand things, that the ordinary moments were the ones that actually mattered most in the end. They were seated near the center of the dining room, the soft golden light of the chandeliers overhead, when Catherine first noticed the man and his daughter at the table beside them. His name, she would learn shortly, was Julian Hayes. He was 36 years old, a widowed single father raising his 7-year-old daughter, Ivy, alone since his wife Eleanor had passed away from complications during childbirth, a loss that had left him raising his daughter from her very first day of life without the partner he had expected to share that particular overwhelming joy and fear with. Julian worked as a structural engineer, a steady and respectable profession, though one that had never afforded him the particular financial cushion that made an evening at a restaurant like this one feel entirely ordinary. Tonight was, in fact, a rare indulgence. Ivy's 7th birthday, and Julian had decided, after careful budgeting and several months of quietly setting aside small amounts specifically for this purpose, that she deserved one truly special evening, the kind with chandeliers and cloth napkins, and a small, dignified celebration that she would, he hoped, remember fondly for years afterward. He sat across from her now, smiling as she carefully cut into her dinner with the particular careful concentration of a child determined to use her utensils properly in a fancy restaurant, his own plate largely untouched, his attention entirely devoted to watching his daughter enjoy her evening. Catherine noticed him first, not because of anything dramatic, but because of something quieter, the particular tenderness in how he watched his daughter, the way his eyes followed her every small movement with an attentiveness that reminded Catherine, with a sudden unexpected ache, of how Thomas used to watch Sophie across their own kitchen table years ago, before everything had changed. She noticed too, after a few minutes of quiet observation, something else. Julian's plate had not moved. He had ordered, she would later confirm with the waiter, only a single modest entree, and he was not, in fact, eating any of it. He was simply watching his daughter enjoy her birthday dinner, cutting his own food into small pieces and rearranging it carefully on his plate, performing the appearance of eating without actually doing so. Catherine recognized this particular performance instantly. She had done it herself more than once in the early years after Thomas's death, when money had been tighter than anyone in her current life would believe, and she had learned to make a single plate stretch convincingly across an entire evening so that Sophie would never once suspect that her mother was quietly going without. "Sophie," she said softly, leaning toward her daughter. "Do you see the man at the table beside us?" Sophie glanced over. "The one with the little girl?" "Yeah, I think today might be her birthday," Catherine said. "Do you notice anything about his plate?" Sophie studied the scene for a moment with the particular careful attention her mother had spent years cultivating in her. Not suspicion, but genuine observation, the habit of actually looking closely at the world rather than simply moving through it. "He's not eating," Sophie said slowly. "He's just moving his food around." "That's right," Catherine said. "I think he might have spent everything he had on tonight to make it special for her, and didn't leave quite enough to feed himself too." Sophie considered this with the particular seriousness of a 10-year-old encountering an idea that mattered. "That's really sad," she said, "but also really nice that he did that for her." "It is both of those things," Catherine agreed. "Sometimes the kindest things people do for the ones they love cost them something they don't talk about afterward." She sat with this observation for several minutes, the particular old ache of her own difficult years resurfacing gently, not painfully, but with the soft familiarity of a memory she had made peace with long ago. She thought about Thomas. She thought about the year after his death, when she had sat across from Sophie at their own own small kitchen table, doing exactly what Julian was doing now, rearranging food on an empty plate so her daughter would never once worry about anything beyond her own dinner. She thought too about the people who had helped her during that difficult stretch, quietly and without fanfare. A neighbor who had accidentally made too much soup 3 weeks running, a coworker who had insisted, gently and without explanation, that Catherine take an extra holiday bonus that had clearly never actually existed in the company's official budget. She had never forgotten those small, careful kindnesses offered without asking anything in return, and she had promised herself, more than once in the years since, that she would extend exactly that kind of quiet generosity to someone else whenever the right moment presented itself clearly enough to recognize. She believed, watching Julian Hayes rearrange his food across the table, that this particular moment had arrived. She did not approach him directly. She understood, from her own experience, that direct charity, however well-intended, carried within it a particular risk of humiliation that could undo all the careful dignity Julian had worked so hard to maintain for his daughter's birthday evening. Instead, she called the waiter over quietly. "The gentleman at the table beside us," she said, keeping her voice low. "I'd like to take care of his check this evening. Quietly, please. I don't want him to know who arranged it, and I don't want any fuss made about it at the table." The waiter, a young man named Oliver who had worked at the restaurant for several years and had developed, over that time, a careful eye for exactly this kind of unannounced generosity, nodded immediately. "Of course, ma'am," he said. "Would you like me to add anything to the order? Dessert, perhaps, for the birthday?" Catherine considered this. "Yes," she said. "A proper dessert, something with a candle, if you have it. And please tell the kitchen. A full second entree for him as well on the house, as though it were simply included with this evening's celebration. I'd like him to actually eat tonight." What followed unfolded with the particular quiet grace that Oliver, to his considerable credit, managed to orchestrate without drawing any unwanted attention toward Catherine's table at all. A second plate arrived for Julian a few minutes later, a full entree, warm and beautifully presented, set down by Oliver with the easy, practiced explanation that it was compliments of the house in honor of the young lady's birthday celebration this evening. Julian looked up, startled. "I'm sorry, I didn't order this." "No charge, sir," Oliver said smoothly. "We like to make birthdays a little extra special here. Please enjoy it while it's warm." Julian hesitated only a moment before the particular exhaustion of months of careful budgeting, combined with the simple, undeniable fact of real hunger, won out over any lingering uncertainty. He ate properly and gratefully for the first time that evening, while Ivy chattered happily beside him about the chandeliers and the soft music drifting from somewhere near the entrance. Dessert arrived sometime later, a small, beautifully decorated cake with a single lit candle, set down in front of Ivy by Oliver with a warm smile. The surrounding tables briefly turned to watch as the little girl's face lit up with delighted surprise. "Happy birthday, miss," Oliver said. "Make a good wish." Ivy closed her eyes carefully, blew out the candle with great ceremony, and opened them again, beaming. "Daddy, did you do this?" she asked. "I didn't, sweetheart," Julian said, looking around the room with quiet confusion, clearly searching for some explanation. "I think someone here was just being kind tonight." He did not discover that evening exactly who had arranged the gesture. Catherine had been careful, deliberately and specifically, to keep her involvement entirely anonymous, understanding from her own past experience of receiving exactly this kind of quiet generosity, that anonymity often allowed a kindness to land more gently, free from the particular complicated weight of debt or obligation that direct charity sometimes carries. But as Julian and Ivy prepared to leave, gathering coats and the small gift bag Ivy had brought along, his eyes briefly met Catherine's across the short distance between their tables. She offered him nothing more than a small, warm smile, the particular smile of someone who recognizes another person's quiet effort and respects it deeply, without needing to announce or explain anything further. Julian, something shifting briefly in his expression, returned the smile with a small, grateful nod, as though some part of him understood, without needing the details confirmed, exactly where the evening's unexpected grace had actually come from. Sophie, watching this entire quiet exchange unfold beside her mother, considered it carefully as they finished their own dessert. "Did you do all that, Mom?" she asked quietly. "The food and the cake? I helped arrange it," Catherine said. "But I didn't do anything especially remarkable, sweetheart. I just remembered what it felt like to need that kind of help once, and I had the means to offer it tonight, so I did." "Why didn't you tell him it was you?" Catherine thought about this carefully before answering. "Sometimes," she said, "the kindest gift you can give someone is letting them keep their dignity intact. If I'd walked over and announced that I was paying for everything, I think some part of his evening would have felt like charity. And charity sometimes makes people feel small, even when it's offered with the best intentions. I wanted him to just enjoy his daughter's birthday, without feeling like he owed anyone anything afterward." Sophie nodded slowly, processing this with the particular thoughtful seriousness that Catherine had worked so hard over the years to nurture in her. "I think that's really wise," she said. "I want to remember that when I'm older." "I hope you do," Catherine said softly. "It's one of the most important things your father taught me, actually, in a roundabout way. He always said that the measure of a person isn't what they have, it's what they're willing to quietly give away without needing credit for it." Catherine never spoke to Julian Hayes again after that evening. Their paths, by the ordinary accidents of city life, simply never crossed in quite the same way afterward. But she thought of him often in the months and years that followed, particularly whenever she found herself in a position to extend exactly that kind of quiet, anonymous generosity to someone else navigating a difficult stretch of their own. She expanded, in the years following that evening, a small charitable initiative within her own company, not publicized widely, not attached to any press release or marketing campaign, simply a quiet internal fund that any employee could discreetly access during genuine hardship, modeled directly on the careful, dignity-preserving kindnesses she herself had received during her own difficult years, and had extended once more to a stranger and his daughter on an ordinary Thursday evening. Sophie grew older, carrying that particular lesson with her carefully, the way children sometimes carry forward exactly the values their parents most hope will take root. Not the lesson of having wealth, but the lesson of what a person chooses to do with it when no one is watching closely enough to notice or applaud. And perhaps that is the gentle truth tucked inside an evening like this one, that the most meaningful kindnesses are very often the quietest ones, offered without any need for recognition or thanks. A mother who once knew hunger herself recognized it instantly in a stranger across a crowded room, and chose, without hesitation, to ease it in the gentlest way she could find. We none of us know, sitting near a stranger in an ordinary restaurant, what quiet struggles they might be carrying, but we can choose, whenever we're able, to offer whatever grace we can, and to let them keep their dignity fully intact while we do it.